It is Tuesday, and it's time to get deep. Jason Hutt here in the bunker live. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I am the editor here at Sci-Fi For Me, and this is the show where we have conversations about lots of different things. And today, at some point, we're waiting for Chris Braley to join us, and that's going to be happening here in a little bit. But let's take care of a couple of housekeeping things. Robert and Holly in the chat, welcome. It says he's in the waiting room. I don't see a waiting room. Let's see here. Huh. Okay, so Chris has sent us an email, a note saying that he's in the waiting room, but I don't see him in the waiting room. All right, so stand by here, folks. Did I send him the right one? All right, we are experiencing some issues. All right, today on the program, Chris Braley from bleedingfool.com will be here. And while we're waiting for connections to be made there, let me go over a couple of housekeeping things here real quick. It would seem that the time zone question has come up a couple of times. So I'm going to put it to the chat. I'm going to put it to people who are watching later. Does it make sense? Is it worthwhile? And is it helpful if we were to start promoting our shows using Eastern and Pacific time rather than Central time? Because apparently it has become a question. It's caused some confusion in terms of scheduling some things. So does it help if we sit there and say 1 o'clock Eastern instead of noon Central? That's the question of the day. So if you have an opinion on that, you want to share that with us, then let us know. A little bit of business here. If you want to save some money on swag, not that you're going to be able to wear it very many places, and I don't think they're doing masks, but superherostuff.com, we do have a discount code over there. You save 10% when you use the promo code Sci-Fi For Me 10. And if you want to support us with the coins that are short everywhere else, subscribestar.com/sci-fi for me is where you can do that. And now let us see if we've got anything going on here. Oh, wait a minute. I might be in the wrong one. Look at that. You know, it helps. It helps to be in the right call. Well, because what happened was, I know what happened. Because I was testing it. I know what happened because I had turned everything on to test the new layout, and that's what I just sent him. And it was like, we're in the wrong call. He was in the right call. I was in the wrong call. Now I'm in the right call. Now let's see what happens. There he is. It's one of those things, right? It's one of those things. Hello, Chris Braley. How are you, sir? Let's see if he's there. I see you. Hello, Chris.
Hey, hey.
Hey, there we are. I can hear you. I can see you. That's excellent. Okay. So, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Jason. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, although I'm a little bit sad that I did not get included in this list of Comicsgate YouTubers. Although we're technically not Comicsgate, nor are we Comicsgate adjacent, but I'm looking at some of this list here, and I'm like, well, half, 2/3 of these people aren't Comicsgate, so I'm wondering what the criteria is. Or
Is that
criteria.
the list
The
that Clownfish TV put
Yeah,
out there?
yeah, I tell you, that's just one of those things.
But who posted that? Wasn't it some guy named Stinky? And what was the name of the original poster of this list?
Sniffy,
Sniffy.
Sniffy, and I have no idea
What,
even where this list
who
has got
cares?
posted.
Who
So
cares? I mean, I don't care. Somebody's gonna call. You can call me straight, gay, atheist, Christian, conservative, Democrat. I don't care. You don't know me. I don't know how much traction this list is getting. I know that Neon from Clownfish, he does his research, and apparently it was keyworded well enough to get picked up. But I'm so tired of people continuously getting misinformed about this stuff.
yeah.
What is Comicsgate, right? I mean, literally,
Hey,
you can go
well,
all the way back to 2014 and find the hashtag. The very first person that used the hashtag Comicsgate was a guy that we share a lot of his works, Avi Green. I don't know if you've ever read Avi's stuff. He's
a
currently
little
on
bit
the
of it, yeah.
yeah, he's on the front page right now with the Gail Simone article.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I think I might have some noise coming
No,
through.
that was me. I hit a button.
Okay, don't hit those buttons. You got a lot more buttons to push, it looks like.
I have a few, yeah. So
But no, I'm not. I don't guess Bleeding Fool's not on the list, are we? We don't have a YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, but it's really we just use it to favorite videos that mention Bleeding Fool.
yeah,
That's all
I
it
do
is.
believe that you guys were on the list. I think you were
Oh
right there at the
no.
bottom, right there at the bottom of the.
Does that mean we're the most or the least? Let me go see
I
this.
don't know if this is ranked any one particular way. So, but
Okay.
I'm
Well,
looking here at the list. I see. Well, no. Now that I'm looking at it again, Quartering, Yellow Flash, Umbrella Guy, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers.
I think it's
Um.
strictly YouTubers.
Okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're not on the list either.
Yeah. Oh well, darn it. That's too bad. So
Missed opportunity.
what is adjacent? What does that mean precisely? Does anybody have a strict definition of
Well,
which
see, and
quadrant we fit in?
that's the question is how are they judging who's part of this group or not? I mean, it almost feels like it's just kind of this arbitrary. If you don't agree with us, you're part of this thing.
I guess we're all Nazis too.
I
Is that right?
I suppose. I mean, I have neglected to wear my brown shirt for a while now, so I guess it's one of those things.
It's a shame. And who makes these people the arbiters of labels and
Right,
truth?
right.
It's
That's the
ridiculous.
question. Well, and this is something that I want to get into with you a little bit because as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the reaction to George R. R. Martin's hosting the Hugos, for example, and I'm
Yes,
looking
good.
at the attacks on Jay Lee and the hits on Dynamite and all of these different things. Something that I mentioned yesterday, I have come to the conclusion that this is not really a situation where it's right versus left, Democrats versus Republicans, conservatives versus liberals, or anything like that. It's this us versus them mentality is even more basic than that. It's about power and control. It's I have power, I want power, I crave power. I'm going to do whatever I can to have that power and keep it. And political ideology aside, I mean, I know that factors into it, and sometimes then what does that power look like? And how does it give you, you talk about the gatekeepers, who determines who's part of these groups and who's not a part of these groups. I would say that somebody like an Ethan Van Sciver, for example, he would have power and influence because his book has made $1 million. Whereas you have somebody like an Alex DeCampi or a Stephanie Cook or somebody who's on the inside, from what does their power derive? Where are they getting their power? Is it something that people have abdicated to them? Is it something that they get because of who they know or what they know about who they know? How does that power become part of the equation for these people? Heather Antos, who is she? Why is she such an influence? Why does she have as big a voice as she does? Gail
Mhm.
Simone, I can see. Gail Simone had a solid run on Batgirl. She was very, very popular, very critically acclaimed. Everybody liked her work up until a certain point.
Yeah.
And you look at how she's behaving now versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's a lot different.
Mhm.
And Gail Simone, I can see having influence because she's
Mhm.
got a track record, she's got a history. Heather Antos does not. Alex
Right.
DeCampi, we don't have any idea who she was outside of the fact that she contributed to Bleeding Cool,
Mhm.
and she's Rich Johnston's favorite. But why does that matter? And we can get into some of that as well, because you have been posting articles about the Whisper Network, and
Yeah.
that comes back into power and control. But I want to set the table a little bit for people who might not be familiar with what's going on. Most of the people who watch this show or listen to our podcast are probably familiar with things that are going on in the comics industry. But just in case we get some new people, uh, let's go back to the beginning of Bleeding Fool,
Mm.
because you guys popped up on my radar about the same time that Bounding into Comics started to take off. John Trent had been doing that site for a while, just doing comics reviews. And as the Comics Gate movement started to ramp up, and you started to see a lot of the Twitter crowd start to pile on and dogpile these people, Bounding into Comics showed up. You guys over at Bleeding Fool showed up. So where was the beginning of Bleeding Fool as a site as it exists now? Were you guys around before, or was this something where somebody just said, Bleeding Cool has become this cesspool of yellow journalism. Let's poke at it.
Um, no, Bounding into Comics was around before us. That's for sure. I had not been familiar with Bounding into Comics when they first came out. I'm friends with John on social media. And we just happened to be, I think, veterans of the social justice wars, you might say. Um, Bleeding Fool launched in 2017, October, and it was strictly because of what Bleeding Cool was doing. I mean, obviously, the name, we didn't just pull the name out of the ether.
Right.
It's a spoof of the Cool website. And the reason that I did it was I would visit Bleeding Cool. I mean, they had news frequently, even if a lot of it was just shill or garbage websites, stuff that we didn't really care about. There would occasionally be a nugget, and they were a little less shilly then than they are now. I think they're really truly a shill site now. Although they've got some decent writers. I used to follow what's his name? The trash talker that
Jude
writes for them now.
Jude
Jude,
Scherer.
yeah. I
Yeah.
used to read him over at the Outhousers before they shut down or became something else. But I was very into the comic scene. I've been a comic reader since, a boy. I'm 51 now. So I've been an off and on comics reader since I was, wow, since 1978.
Yeah.
I must have been 10 years old. I've sold my collections and gotten out of it for years, but there's some long boxes back here, a few of them. There's some graphic novels on the shelves. I still get an order from Cowabunga or DCBS every now and then, and I've got a local comic shop. And I was a regular on the forums over at a website called Comic Geek Speak for a long time. And I kept noticing that the only articles that would come out would be how great the latest gender or race swap or replacement of a legacy character or something like that was. And there would be a few people on the forums that would say, well, that's kind of just lazy. I mean, is that the only idea we can come up with anymore? This was around the time that the Ghostbusters 2016 version, the Lady Ghostbusters,
Sure.
was coming out. And a bunch of people, there was a lot of back and forth in the forums about it, but not more than what you used to get at the comic shop when people would say, who can win Superman versus the Hulk, right? I've always been able to argue or debate people and still be friends with them. That's just a sign of maturity to me. If somebody doesn't want to argue or debate, um, they don't have to, and I'll back off. But nowadays, it's not that way. Nowadays, if you don't agree with me, Jason, you're Hitler.
Yeah, well, and
Um,
it seems to me that a lot of these people, especially over Twitter comics, or comics
mm,
Twitter, I guess is what they're called.
yeah, the
They're
Twitterati.
they're very childish. They're very
Yes,
immature in their
yes,
behavior, and not just in comics. We see it in video games. We
everything.
see it in literature with the Hugos and Worldcon
Movies. Yeah,
movies. The whole entertainment complex.
yeah.
These people who think that they are the tastemakers, the gatekeepers.
What's the social media? I think that's a byproduct of social media. Like Gail Simone, before she had 62,000 followers on Twitter, was actually a lot more tolerable. I'm working with Mike Barron on a project right now called Florida Man. It's on in demand on Indiegogo right now. Hope people go check it out. But he said something about, he responded to somebody had tweeted something about, it looks like comics is starting to get filled up with bitter cat ladies. And or eventually comics is going to be nothing but written by bitter cat ladies. And Mike Barron on Twitter said they already are. That was his response. And then Gail Simone, who used to work with Mike, saw the tweet. He didn't mention Gail. It wasn't in response to Gail. She saw the tweet and posted, I always thought you were better than this, Mike. And then went into this, she tweet storms, right? So she goes into a tweet storm, and eventually they had a phone call later and worked it out, I guess, like Jay Lee and Tom King did. But I think when you've got hundreds of thousands of followers that are constantly liking and blowing smoke up your butt, you feel more powerful. You become more corrupted, right?
Yeah,
And
you
I'm,
start to
I'm
buy
not going
into
to,
your own press.
sure. Well, and it goes the same with likes on Facebook and anything else. You're getting that affirmation that what you said is right. But it doesn't mean that the people that are liking it are well informed. And I think that's one of the things I'm getting saddened about is a lot of the people that are following somebody like Sniffy are totally uninformed,
Yeah.
right? They're not informed at all about what's going on. So back to why Bleeding Full started, I would comment in the comments section of the other website, and usually would get a lot of traction, just because I don't just go in there and try to cuss people out or call them names. I really, if I've got a point of view, I really try to express it. And I expressed something. They were talking about the need for more diversity in comic books, typically what they are campaigning for over there. And I said, isn't it fascinating? One of my comments was, isn't it fascinating how back when Chris Claremont wrote X-Men 94, there was absolutely no comment about the diversity, the racial diversity, and all that on that comic book cover or anywhere in the marketing. And yet it was a massive success. And nobody replied to that comment. Nobody replied to it, downvoted it, upvoted it, anything. So I'm savvy on the web, and I logged out and I noticed that it wasn't there. I had been shadow banned. And because I made that comment, which I thought was a pretty tame comment, I guess it was just wrong think. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I decided right then and right there, I said, man, I've crafted websites before. I'm just going to do one where you can talk. You can express these opinions without being shadow banned, almost like a freedom of speech mission. And we only have one rule in our comment section. It says, don't be a name calling jerk and you won't get blocked.
Now,
well, let
me ask you this though,
but not lately.
Because the way you're describing that now, it sounds like the original intent was to do sort of a blog anthology, for lack of a better descriptor.
Oh, it's just an online journal.
But you guys are, I don't know, did it evolve subconsciously into a news site just organically, or was that a conscious decision on the part of you guys in editorial, where you saw an opportunity here to sit there and say, okay, we can take it to Bleeding Cool, we can take it to IO9, let's lean into the news.
We always wanted to take a piss out of the mainstream media. I mean, you go to CBR now in their forums, and if you mention Richard Meyer or Jawbreakers, you'll get banned. It happened recently on Reddit. I tried to mention that crowdfund campaign for Florida Man, and next thing you know, the account was banned with no way to redress your grievances at all. And it wasn't even because anything negative had been said. It was strictly because they were clamping down on free speech. Free speech and its tenet is about protecting speech that's unpopular. It's not about protecting safe speech, right? It's not called safe speech, it's free speech. And so once I talked to some other friends, the same thing happened. Within a few weeks of Bleeding Fool, some other forum that I was in found out that I was running Bleeding Fool. I tried to kind of actually keep my identity a secret because of how it is now. We've got a writer that did the Whisper Network exposés, and they're coming for her. They're searching for her on Google. They're looking up the Google image of the photo on her bio. And of course, I'm going to tell you right now, Jason, if it wasn't already clear, Penny Parker is a pseudonym. That photo is not her.
Yeah, I figured that was the case.
But we're not going to reveal that kind of stuff because we're dealing with a culture nowadays that will go back into your history, attack you, call your employers, and so on and so forth. It's ridiculous.
Now, you've got some detractors on that because we're going to get into the Whisper Network stuff. But you've got some people that are making the claim, they're making the accusation that because your writer is hiding behind a pseudonym and a stock photo,
right,
that reduces or eliminates the credibility of the material that's being put out because you're not able to do something.
That's fair. I don't care. The information is as true as we know it to be. I communicated directly with Bill Willingham to establish that it was a factual story that Penny was posting. I go through as the editor and look to make sure that we are covering our crossing our T's, dotting our I's. Of course, there's misspellings. There's going to be occasionally, or a missed word here and there. It's not a perfect. We're not the Washington Post, but again, we're not the Washington Post. So I just try to make sure that we're not liable for anything that we are publishing. There's no defamation. This was a story, and the story wasn't what did Cook do. What did Bill accuse her of? The story was that Bleeding Cool had published this and then chose to memory hole it.
So it's more of an indictment of them as opposed to...
Sure. Stephanie is one more member of the Whisper Network that got scolded, I guess you might say, this week, because Stephanie's very hypocritical about how men handle money and transparency and on and on and on. So it was time to say, well, Stephanie, what about this? And it's not like we are coming after people to insult them. We're just holding a mirror up. right? This is what you did. So what's different now that you think you can attack men and the comic book business when Bill Willingham accused you of embezzlement of $10,000 or more, and you left the United States and never answered to the charges that he filed.
And it
We've
doesn't
got
look
an
like she's been on Twitter since a few hours before you posted
If
that
you
article.
ask me, well, and let's look at that, those actions or the fruit of those actions. If I were an innocent man, I would be defending myself,
Right.
and I would be able to do it really quick. And we haven't heard from Stephanie Cook's attorney, just like Bill Willingham never heard from Stephanie Cook's attorney. Now we filed. One of our mutual friends is looking into an FOIA request today to get more information from the police department. If we get that, we will share it if it's newsworthy. But again, we aren't NPR. We are not CBS, ABC, NBC. We basically tell the stories that we want to, just like CBR does, just like Rich Johnston does, right?
Right.
We are not trying to say we are the only channel for news. We're an alternative. We're an internet journal. We have several contributors, dozens of contributors, everybody from Robert Willing, who does his video reviews, to Tristan, to Penny, to Mandy, to Hube. We've got, all kinds of people, Arnell from the UK, and they're all varied opinions. Arnell hates Trump. John loves Trump. We don't necessarily vet all of our writers. Maybe I should. I had to part ways with one last fall. And I've had some people write for us that maybe held or espoused some views that I vehemently disagreed with.
Yeah.
But if it's newsworthy and they've done their homework, we'll publish it and put it out there.
Well, and that's the thing that we've talked about here with the mix of staff. The idea of everybody has to believe the same thing is on the face of it is a little ridiculous. I mean,
it's weird.
How do you do something like that?
Right.
But at the same time, now we've got people like Barry what's her name, Barry Weiss, resigning from the New York Times. You've got Ariana Picari resigning from MSNBC and calling out the mainstream media for their bias, calling it a cancer, calling it irresponsible, calling it disingenuous, basically saying you guys hate the president so much it's affecting your judgment in terms of journalism. And I look at sites like Bleeding Cool, like IO9, like the Mary Sue.
Yeah.
And, IO9 and the Mary Sue were really bad about it, basically saying, if you don't agree with us.
IO9. I used to go to IO9 every morning until about 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and I checked out of IO9 when they posted their big pro-science manifesto here a few years ago, basically saying, if you don't believe in science, if you're a Christian, you're terrible, go away. Well, you can be a Christian, you can still believe that science is science. I mean, the two are not diametrically opposed to each other.
Right.
There's a lot of science in the Bible if you look for it.
Sure.
But this idea of ideological gatekeeping and that sort of the purity test, it's gotten way out of hand. But it's not just the mainstream media that's doing it. It's genre media as well, and this cancel culture and the culture war is directly in the midst of all of this. And whether you take a side or not, a side's going to be chosen for you.
There's a war going on. Yeah, there's a war going on. And they're not taking any prisoners, Jason. They're not taking any prisoners. No one who has ever been affiliated, kind to, or liked a Comicsgate creator or project or anything like that will escape if they have their way.
Well, you look at what happened to Peter Simeti over at Alternative Comics. He said, I'm not taking a position. I just want to sell comics. And because he didn't denounce Comicsgate, he was associated with Comicsgate and said, okay, he's evil. Okay, how do you determine these things? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
it's
because
yeah,
he didn't denounce it. And then and one of the things about the Whisper Network that demonstrated, you mentioned Heather Antos first, when Scott Snyder came out and said, "Hey, sorry, it's been a long weekend. I didn't get to this," meaning I don't live on social media. I have a life.
right.
And he said that he denounced it. And Heather Antos was like, I thought you were better than that. So it's never good enough,
Oh, right.
and they're going to try to shame you. And we called, going back to the last week's part two, we called the Scott Snyder thing, and now he's stepping away from DC Comics. It's not our fault. Maybe we amplified it or brought it to people's attention, but it is what it is,
Now,
right?
is the Scott Snyder thing? I thought the timing of it was rather interesting in that we got the news that he was starting to pull away from DC, but that kind of thing does not necessarily imply a cause and effect, because if Scott Snyder has got some projects in the works that he's going to pursue, my guess is he's probably been working on this for a while, and the timing of it might be coincidental.
Could
But
be.
I don't see where uh, anything that you guys posted would have caused Scott Snyder to back away from DC, because DC's a pretty good gig for him, has been
Of
for a
course it
while.
is. Sure. Yeah.
And he would be one of those people, and it's one of those things where back in the 90s you had certain creators that sold a book just on their name, Scott McFarlane being one of them. Nowadays you don't have that many. Scott Snyder is one of them, where if you have a book that he's writing, odds are pretty good it's going to sell.
Well, Scott's going to make more money doing his own thing than he is at DC.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane would never go back to Marvel or DC. You know that.
Yeah.
And this maybe, I don't care if we were a catalyst or a fuel for his decision making or not, but it would surprise me if no one said to him, dude, why do you even want to work around that nest of vipers? You need to be doing your own thing instead of doing this DC new hires
Well,
workshop, dude.
how much do you think maybe was a factor with the situation with Sean Gordon Murphy? I mean, you look at,
Same thing. Yeah.
Ethan has sat there and said they're going to attack you. They're going, if you don't come out and do this, they're going to attack you. When Sean Gordon Murphy came out and said, "I just want to sell books. You treat the customers right,
Right.
treat people with respect," he got dogpiled. Now he's
But
gone
stop
and
right there
doing
for
it.
just a second. And wasn't that really
Very
the
telling.
main thrust of Comicsgate? I mean, we just did an article from Doug Ernst, yesterday. It's still on the front page about Dan Slott, and it's this unprofessional behavior from some of these pros
Yeah.
on social media. Again, that people just get sick of it and say, "Man, either they learn that that professional has blocked them using a blockchain or whatever it's called, block bots, or they have just said the most atrocious things." And I really trimmed my own pull list back when I would see some of the posts personally, and that's part of another reason that Bleeding Full just kind of picked up its pace, was seeing things like what Nick Spencer would say, what Eric Larson would say, what Dan Slott would say, what Mark Wade would say, and so on and so on. I mean, I could just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And there's no accountability for that. So you've got people that are trashing or publicly trashing people they don't like on Twitter. Okay. And someone who's not in the fight, that's not part of Comicsgate or just isn't a Trump supporter, because most of these people, it always seems to be people who hate Trump,
Oh yeah.
Greg Rucka, etc., Bill Sienkiewicz, and so on. But they've all said some of the most ugly, I mean, some of the ugliest things. And if they call it racist and somebody says, well, I'm black, or they say it's homophobe and somebody says, well, I'm gay, that are on the Comicsgate side of things, which is, why can't people be hired on merit? Why can't you just focus on good story and good art without having to include all this propaganda? Or why are you gender swapping my favorite hero? Or why are you race bending someone?
Yeah.
You're either you're a hateful bigot, you're a racist, you're homophobe, and so on. And then when somebody that they say that to says, but I'm gay, I'm a black gay man, why are you saying that to me? And they'll say, well, you're nothing but a token. So it's the
Exactly.
most bigoted, intolerant group of people. And as you see more and more of that, I do believe, I don't think it's the main reason that comics are suffering, but I don't, it hasn't helped. And I remember in 2018, DC Comics came out with a social media policy. This was right around the same time that Peter Simeti tried to come out with one. And it's funny, Peter finally admitted that he came out with his because there were people submitting work to Alterna, and he would go check out their social media and he would find out he was blocked by that person. So he said,
And that's
if you're going to work
actually,
for,
that's something that's come up from a couple of other people that have said, I'm a new creator.
yeah,
How am I going to get my stuff out there
yeah,
if all of these people have me blocked? I can't even
right,
communicate with them,
right,
whether they're an editor like Heather Antos
right,
or CB Cebulski or whoever. If they're
yeah.
blocking me, I can't pitch my work.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's lazy too. That's the other thing. It's almost like when you use, from my understanding, I've never used a block bot, blockchain, whatever it's called. Maybe there's a better term for it, but basically it's just sort of this hack where you can put in one person's, like if you don't want Comicsgate followers
Hmm.
or people to bother you, you might take Ethan Van Sciver, who's one of the loudest voices on the Comicsgate side of the fence. He said he's not the leader. He doesn't even, I don't think, own the copyright for the name and so on. And but he's really the loudest voice of Comicsgate, and he espouses the philosophy of it. Well, you might, as a easily triggered Trump hating creator that works for Marvel that doesn't want any Comicsgate criticism, you might just go, I'm going to take Ethan's handle on Twitter, plug it into this hack, and then anybody that follows Ethan is blocked
Yep.
automatically.
May,
Well,
may,
Ethan's got thousands and thousands of followers. How's that going to work out when you discover that not every one of his followers hates, uh, loves or hates Trump or has anything to do with it? It's
yeah.
just foolishness.
Well, Mazurus in the chat says it's chain blocking. Says he thinks
Chain
it's
blocking.
done with some third-party application.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I've started making a list of all of the people who have blocked us just
Mm,
for whatever reason. I mean, there are several on there: Tess Fowler, Monica Rial,
mm-hmm.
Kwanzaa, Greg Rucka,
Sure.
Mags, Chris Sabella,
I've
John.
decided I don't buy anything from those people
Yeah.
anymore. They're certainly not going to buy anything from me. I don't think I should do anything but return the favor.
But
I think
what's
it's a handy
interesting,
list to have. These are people that block customers
yeah. But
and
what's
are hateful on social media. Put
what's
the list
interesting on
together.
this
I'll add
though
to it.
is Joe Glass is on this list.
Mm.
And you start looking at some of
And
the
who is Joe Glass?
Joe
An
Glass is
openly gay comic creator that writes for Bleeding Cool?
Beth Elderkin.
Never heard of her.
Well, she writes for IO9. I mean, you
Ah,
start to see
okay.
some of these comics journalists starting to block people as well. It's like, wait a minute, if you're a journalist, if you're a media person,
Hmm.
wouldn't it behoove you to stay open to everything so you can see what's going on if you find the beginning of a thread for a story. Oh, somebody posted this. That's a news story, baby. And it's one of those things where you're cutting your nose off to spite your own face, and you think that you're taking the high road. You think you're the better person for blocking all of these people when you're really eliminating a lot of, one, opportunity for work, two, any kind of opportunity for dialogue and discussion. These people don't want to talk. They don't want to have any
Right,
kind of a back and forth. You
right.
either agree with them or you're a Nazi.
Well, even and then there are creators like Mike Barron, for instance, who is openly conservative. He espouses some of the Comicsgate tenets, but I mean he doesn't get into all the wherewithals and the war campaign and all that kind of messy stuff. And the same goes with Chuck Dixon. And they've both sort of been blacklisted from the industry. And these are Eisner Award winning, Inkpot Award winning writers that
Hmm.
just wrote legendary runs. But you'd rather have Cena Grace working for Marvel doing Iceman. So these guys don't run blockchains. And matter of fact, they occasionally look for colorists and letterers to work on their projects and artists. Well, the artists that have blocked them aren't going to get that work. The artists that haven't have a better shot. You've got no chance at all if you're blocking. So these people that are blocking, I mean, I don't care who Heather Antos blocks. I don't want to see anything she has to say. She mocks Christians on Easter Sunday. Um, and she's just mean, and she's basically Karen Antos, really. So who cares that she blocks me? But it is a good indicator for me to go, there's a name I really ought to keep in mind, or maybe keep it on a note on my mobile phone. So when I'm going to the comic shop, I'll flip open that first page and make sure it's not there. Yeah. And there's a few people at Marvel like that, editors at Marvel, that I've had to end my affiliation with any runs on because of Crackshot. I'll let you figure out who that is, but he's one of the editors there. And Tom Brevoort, I mean, he's a jerk to his own son. It doesn't surprise me that he calls any complaining Marvel fans crybabies. So why would we want to give money to people that hate us, right? And if the people that Heather Antos is appealing to are such big comic book fans, why isn't Valiant doing better? Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is, you say, yeah, well, these people are Comicsgate, these people are terrible persons, and you see in the comment threads in Twitter is like, oh, thanks for giving me some new people to check out. People are starting to turn this around and say, okay, you're calling them Comicsgate, I should check them out. It's pretty much the reverse of what's been going on with the Hugo Awards, because back in the day, if you saw this was a Hugo nominee or a Hugo winner, it meant that this was probably a really good book. And nowadays, this is a virtue signaling book, stay away from it. A lot of times. Now,
Precisely.
There are some winners that are probably worthy of the award.
Yeah.
But the corruption of all of these, the Eisners, the Hugos, all of these, it's almost as if there are two, like Earth 1 and Earth 2 have kind of started merging back and forth, and the values of one and the values of the other are starting to battle with each other. Now we're in this final phase of which one's going to come out the one at the end. Robert in the chat, so many on social media demand you have an opinion on Trump. I will, when every American has the correct opinion of the Australian and the Canadian prime ministers. Well, and that's the thing too. It's not just people in the United States. I mean, Comicsgate as a movement includes a lot of people who don't even live in the United States, and they want to. This whole cadre of people want to associate everything with Trump. And it goes back a ways, but I've made the point on a couple of occasions that November 2016 was the turning point for a lot of the culture war, where people just started to lose their minds.
Yeah,
because
and Brexit too. Brexit also on a global scale. It was sort of like the right and the left hand, the 1-2 punch. I think with Trump being elected and Brexit being voted.
Well, and you see that with Patrick Stewart's comments when he was talking about, when he was promoting Picard before it came out. The fact that they were going to make it all about Brexit and Trump is like, well, I don't want to see that show.
Well, and I haven't watched a single episode. I'm not going to.
It's not good. It's not.
No, good. Well, I've heard that, and I'm more entertained by watching someone like Gary Bueller, or from Nerdrotic, talk about it, or Az from Hills versus Babyface, because these guys are true fans of Star Trek, Doctor Who, and so on, and they've just gone totally woke. And now you've got the Major League Baseball, the NBA going woke. Comics have gone woke. Movies are going woke. It's just a mess. It's a mess. And I take a little bit of solace when I see corporations like Trader Joe's or Red Bull getting rid of some of their woke people. At first it's all a big virtue signal. We've got to show that we love everybody. We've got to show that we're not the haters and the phobes. But at the end of the day, you got to appeal to your base, and your base doesn't care about things like the effort to increase the amount of drag queen story time hours at the local elementary school, right?
Well, and I think the other thing too is you're starting to see in in the media the discussion about the cancel culture with this letter
Yeah.
in Harper's and the response in the
Yeah.
Atlantic and all of the back and forth.
Well, and George R. and
And
Harry
J.K.
Potter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
J.K.
J.K.
Rowling.
Rowling. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, now that that discussion is starting to be had, I think it's an indicator that there are enough people who are participating in the cancel culture who are now starting to feel their effects, because you get people like, well, like in the YA universe, you've got Alexandra Duncan who had to pull her book. You had Emily Wenzel who had to pull her book. Kosako Jackson had to pull his book because they're not the right people to write those stories because skin color, orientation, whatever. And they're
Isn't that
part of it.
childish?
It is.
Isn't that
It is.
childish?
And people are sitting there saying, well, wait a minute. Why are you attacking me? I'm one of you. Well,
Hmm.
you're not one of us enough. And now
Right.
people are starting to realize that, all animals are created equal, just some animals are more equal than others.
Indeed.
And we're getting into that point. I mean, I've said this. We're at the intersection of Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Brave New World, and Animal Farm.
Wow.
You see them burning Bibles in Portland now. That's where we are. And I have to wonder if the discussion about cancel culture that's going on now in the media might be a turning point, might be a corner, a fork in the road where we sit there and go, well, wait a minute, this has gone too far. And because now
Hmm.
there's, the snake is starting to eat itself, and they're starting to realize that they're not immune from the other people who could go after them. And you look what's happening with Ellen DeGeneres,
Right.
and I think you could trace that all the way back to the blowback she got from sitting at a football game next to George W. Bush.
Hmm.
Up until that point, Ellen DeGeneres was a hero,
Sure.
and
Well,
now,
yeah.
there's not. So,
I think everything is sort of a swinging pendulum, right?
hmm
And the response to Donald Trump really pushed a hard swing towards social justice and encouraged people like the Marxists
yeah,
and the America hating left to really set their hair on fire and
yeah.
make a spectacle of themselves.
Well,
And I think that the reason it hasn't swung back yet is because the people who don't hate the president, don't hate America, just want good entertainment without propaganda, aren't setting their hair on fire. But now that you have a few people who are like classic liberals, like a J.K. Rowling, who are saying things that shouldn't really be considered hate speech, but they are being considered hate speech. I think a lot of people are starting to get what is euphemistically described as red pilled,
yeah,
like what Neo took in the Matrix, and they wake up to the reality is that the idea that people believe some of this crazy stuff is not true. There are plenty of them, yeah, and they make a lot of noise, but they're not the majority. It's just that most people don't want to get in the dirt, in the mud. It's kind of
hmm
like if there's somebody fighting in the middle of a shopping mall, people might stand around the edges and walk, but most people just want to get out of there. Most people just want to go live their lives, get away from the fray.
right.
The people hanging around don't necessarily get involved, and then there's just this small group that does get into the tussle. And they're pulling for one person or the other. Those are the vocal people. But I think as more and more people wake up and push back against just the sheer lunacy that I think is being pitched as mainstream thought. Um, I was on Screen Rant the other day, and they were pushing Empire, Marvel's big crossover event,
Yeah,
and it was being called a great gay space opera, and it had Hulkling, who is gay, kissing his boyfriend or whatever on the featured thumbnail. And I thought, I don't know if that's a good marketing move. I don't know if it's going to effectively increase sales or not. I tend to think that it's probably not going to increase sales. I don't know that it will impact them negatively. But to think that that is sort of that's an ideal way to market your next big event, to me just seems like, man, you guys are really going really far afield if you think that people who want to read comic books are only interested in the gender or the sexual preference of the characters. I don't know that when I was reading Spider-Man as a teenager, I don't recall ever even thinking about Mary Jane and Peter Parker getting it on. I mean, as hot as Mary Jane is, it never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to me that maybe him and Flash had fooled around in college or anything like that. I mean, those things don't enter my mind. And for them to be sort of front and center on any comic book event, to me just feels like political propaganda.
Rezakai in the chat says, let's say if Trump had not gotten elected, would Comicsgate still have coalesced the way it did? Because I've said Trump's election was kind of this flashpoint for a lot of the insanity that we've seen. Do you think that we would still be where we are if Hillary Clinton had gotten elected instead of Trump, or would we be in worse shape, or would this just be a same song, different verse, just evolving differently from what we've got?
Well, potentially the conservatives would have their own whisper network, right? And I say that tongue in cheek because I'm a member of, some conservative only comic people on Facebook. It's not a secret group. I mean, you can find it, but I don't know. I know I am. I mean, I'm an unabashed America lover. I agree with President Trump on probably 70% of the things that he does, and maybe 60 something percent of what he says. So I'll vote for him again. Nobody has presented themselves that I would rather vote for.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of communist China. I don't want them to have any attachment to America other than to be somebody that buys from us and sells to us. But having said all that, I don't know. What a nightmare scenario. There's been so many things that have taken place in the last 3.5 years, 4 years, that just imagining how Hillary Clinton would have handled the coronavirus, for instance. I bet we would all still be stuck in our homes right now, all being tested for vaccines.
Well, we are kind of still stuck in our homes.
I'm not, but I know some people are.
But and that's what gets me on this, not to get too deep in the weeds on politics, but everybody keeps blaming Trump for all of this when it's the Democrat governors and mayors of these cities and states who are implementing all of these policies for lockdowns and masks, and you can't open your business.
Well, if he was if he was the fascist everyone said he was, or the Mussolini or the Hitler, he would tell all the governors what they're supposed to do, but he lets the governors lead their state and the mayors lead their cities. That's what they were put there for, and the people that are suffering under those governors or mayors had an opportunity to vote for those people. If you should be mad at anybody, it's not the president. Maybe it's your neighbors. If you didn't vote for the people that are in office, it's their fault. They're the ones that voted for those people. And I can't blame Trump for the virus. He was, back when he was banning travel from China, Joe Biden was saying that was racist. Nancy Pelosi, the highest ranking Democrat in the United States, was saying that was racist. She was waltzing around Chinatown in San Francisco without a mask on, saying, "Oh, we love our beautiful Chinese immigrants. Trump's a racist to be able to think he can ban travel." Well, it was a good idea. Obviously, this is the Chinese Communist Party virus. You call it the Wuhan flu or whatever you want. I think it's funny. I like jokes. I made the comment the other day, though, that Triumph the Insult Comic Dog or Andrew Dice Clay would be run out of town. I laugh at guys like Dave Chappelle, but he gets a lot of hate anytime he makes a joke about a trans person.
Yeah.
He can make all the jokes he wants about white people, but the minute he makes a joke about a trans person, he's a hater. And I don't understand what that's about, because in my mind, you should be able to make fun of everybody. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, white people, black people, Asian people, Mexicans, Indonesians, whatever, right? You should be able to make fun of anybody if the joke's funny. If the joke's not funny, it doesn't necessarily mean the person's a racist because the joke wasn't funny. It's just a bad joke. People need to learn how to take a joke.
I think part of that is that people on the left generally don't have a sense of humor. Well, are on the what I call the lunatic left. Now, I do have some friends who are left of center, and they do seem to have a sense of humor. They can appreciate when things are funny. Before we go, I want to go ahead and make sure that I point people to this on your website. This is the first part of two so far that have been published on bleedingfool.com. This is the first article that basically establishes the existence of the Whisper Network, talks about the leaks and some of the different discussions that are going on in this very secret private group on Facebook. And then part two that was dropped last week talks about like what we talked about with the allegations against Stephanie Cook, the denial that there was even a group when we know that there's a group, the what looks like targeting Scott Snyder as the next one. Chris, let me ask you this: there was a list a long time ago, the odds makers list. Basically, you know, which
It's down there at
ones?
the bottom.
Yeah,
It's down there. Yeah. Right.
so, what are the chances? Because Scott Snyder was the top of that list. What are the chances that Brian Michael Bendis is next as a target? Do you think they're going through this as their menu, or is this maybe not necessarily in this order? But should we be looking at these people? Because you know there are some pretty well known individuals in this.
Yeah.
Who should we be looking at
Well,
next? Do you think?
I think that you know, CB Cebulski actually attacked one of our contributors on social media, called him a liar. Spike Valentine has contributed several articles to us, and Spike was making a claim about his work for Marvel, and CB jumped in. And you like to think that guys like CB Cebulski kind of stay above it all. I mean, mostly all he ever tweets about is food.
Yeah.
Go
Well, and Jim
figure.
Lee hasn't said a whole lot about anything either.
That's true. I think they're both just puppets. I think really the one who's running the show at Marvel is Sana Amanat. I think she's really the de facto leader of the direction of Marvel. I don't think CB would ever push back against her.
Yeah.
And if he does, I think he knows his place, really. And I think that's kind of how this whole Whisper Network thing works. I think one of the reasons that Scott would go down first is Scott is in that DC workshop where he's working in an environment where he's having to be work closely with some of the people that happen to be in the Whisper Network. So he has to defer to maybe a lesser talented person because they tick a particular diversity box, instead of like the old school, like back in the Bronze Age, where people were hired and got better gigs because they were good, and readers responded to them. Hiring somebody like a Gabby Rivera on a new character like America Chavez, I mean, that was a clown show. And the numbers were an abysmal failure, just like Cena Grace on Iceman. They're just targeting and ticking diversity boxes. And I feel like Snyder worked so closely in that that he was an easy target.
Yeah.
I think he got hassled. I'm sure that he's been ready to go, and now he is. I wish him well. I know that Snyder has come out against Comics Gate. He's definitely no friend of.
But only when he was pushed.
That's true.
He didn't do it just on his own spontaneously. He had to be nudged into that corner before he said anything. Kind of like when Neil Adams came out and said, "Well, what is all of this going on?" And then 2 hours later, he's spouting all of this anti-Comicsgate stuff, and people were like, "Somebody got to Neil Adams, well, somebody got to Scott Snyder," and some of these people that are denouncing after the fact. Yeah. When they sit there and say, "Well, I don't know what are you talking about? I don't know anything about this." Now, let me ask you this.
If I have my way, we're going to reveal some of the people that are informing these people who change their minds or get informed about CG and come out.
Robert mentions IDW in the chat. Let me ask you this really quick, because I'm doing some of this. I'm looking at some of these attacks on Dynamite, on Jay Lee, who's doing a lot of work for Dynamite. And you look at the kind of material that Dynamite publishes. It's a lot of licensed material.
Sure.
And the other, and I'm going back and I'm asking myself, why would Dynamite be such a big target for these people? Why go after Dynamite? It can't be just the fact that Nick Barucci is friends with Ethan. That can't be all of it.
Oh,
And I get to
I think
thinking,
I think they're going after it, and I want to hear your opinion, but I do think a lot of it has to do with Ethan and doing covers, and of course the Cecil cover and so on. I think that put a target on them, but I'm sure there's more to it. What's your theory?
well, I'm thinking about the angle of the licensed properties.
Hmm.
And the other comics publisher that does a lot of licensed properties is IDW.
Yeah.
And IDW has done a number of partnerships with both Marvel and DC. You know,
Hmm.
DC, you've got the Batman Ninja Turtles crossover, and IDW now is doing the Marvel stuff with the all ages crossovers. And I have to wonder, with IDW being in such financial straits,
Yeah.
their main competition for licensed properties is Dynamite. So does Marvel and DC, do they have a vested interest in IDW surviving? And so because of that, we dogpile on Dynamite and damage their market share, and maybe they lose some of the licenses and they flip over to IDW, and now we can do crossovers with Marvel and DC.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a theory, and it's not based on anything that I've seen one thing or another or a factoid or a thing. But I'm just starting to look at the different breadcrumbs of who's doing what where,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm wondering about this because Jay Lee, you attack Cecil to get to Ethan, you attack Jay to get to Nick.
Hmm.
Who's next, and what's their strategy? And I have to wonder if maybe Dynamite is a convenient target in order to bolster IDW's position in the marketplace because they're dying on the vine. They're, 26, $30 million in debt.
Hmm.
And that is going to hurt if they go away and Marvel and DC's sales continue to go the direction that they're going. Who's going to sell those books? So I'm wondering about that.
Well, let's think about Dynamite. What's their most valuable license, Red Sonja or Vampirella?
I would say either or, and
Yeah.
then maybe Deja Thoris on the back end of that. But
Yeah, but they're not really. I mean, the whole thing about Dynamite is it's cheesecake covers,
yeah,
and occasionally they do something like didn't they do the Battlestar Galactica classic
I think they did.
stuff a while back? Yeah. IDW has and Nick is a good businessman. He's doing well, and I think it's because he spends all his money on the covers. And frankly, I don't think any of the interior artists are very good. I'm a Red Sonja fan. I saw in the chat somebody mentions Marvel being able to get back to Red Sonja. I'm sure Nick would love to license a Red Sonja Conan crossover. I don't think anything would stop Marvel, and I don't think anything should stop Marvel and Dynamite from doing that. As far as I can tell, I've got back here. I've got some of the latest Savage Sword and the Marvel Years Conan omnibus, and Sonya's in there.
Yeah,
So they've been able to work out something. Um, so I don't necessarily think that's it because in my mind, Dynamite just doesn't spend the money on the interior work. So he cuts corners wherever he can, and it was just a smart business move for him to let somebody like Ethan Van Sciver do a cover. Because did you see how much money these crowd funds make? Probably more than another number one issue with 5 variant covers of Deja Thoris. As far as IDW, man, they really know how to put a book together, especially an archival book. I've got all their Spider-Man newspaper collections.
hmm
They do great artist archival books and things like that, and collected editions. But man, they can't run their business. Chris Rael, he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out. This latest guy, he's there for 5 days before they have to let go of him. I think that so many of these comic publishers have started looking at how can we get into the movie business.
right.
And in my mind, that's the last thing IDW should have been thinking about. I really enjoyed IDW's Back to the Future books and some others. But you look at somebody like a Chris Ryall, who was leading IDW for so long into that failure. He's the same politics as somebody like a Gail Simone. And there's so many of them like that. I mean, I can't fault it. It's almost like most of these creatives are from Portland, and that's just how they think. But I don't know. I, I think Disney controls a lot of what Marvel does, and you see Disney licensing their stuff to IDW. They license it to Dark Horse. And they're in charge of Marvel, so that's why that stuff gets licensed to IDW also.
Right.
And Marvel has gotten themselves so screwed up with who's in control now. Anything they do in the Spider-Man comics, anything has to be approved by Sony because of Sony's ownership. So it's just a convoluted mess. And we've got all these little people like Gail or Heather and so on, Cook, Alex DeCampi, that have their little fiefdoms that feel like they reign supreme. But I think that anybody that cows before these women, women who one of them in the group, her handle is Unburnt Witch. I mean, if that doesn't indicate what their mindset is, that they would proudly refer to themselves as a witch that hasn't been burnt yet. I don't know. What are we dealing with? Sociopaths? Now, that's not to say all 443 women in that group. It's not a hive mind. Just like anybody that supports a Comicsgate comic book project, they don't all think alike. And most of these women are not active in the group. And it's really lost a lot of its activity since Mark Waid. Of course, if you read in the Whisper Network articles, you see that. But, there's a lot of very active ones. To me, the one, as someone who's in media, the big story for me, which you didn't touch on, I mean, we kind of did, but you mentioned Snyder, and of course you mentioned Stephanie Cook, and of course just the introduction of the Whisper Network and showing who some of the moderators, not moderators, but actual administrators of the group are. I was very disappointed that Amy Chu is one. I have every issue of her Red Sonja run. And it was the exception to the rule. Almost every issue of that Red Sonja run, I think, was done by a guy named, I want to say Carlos Gomez. I could be wrong.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, but boy, his artwork was spectacular. I recommend anybody check out Amy Chu's Red Sonja run. And it was a great setup too, because it was sort of that fish out of water, which aped the issue, the What If issue back in the first volume of Marvel, where Conan lands in New York City in the modern day, based off some Savage Sword of Conan black and white issue. But I feel like I was disappointed about Amy and finding out who some of the leadership in that group are. But the story I think that gets overlooked is that one about Heidi McDonald. Heidi's in the group. Heidi did a big hagiography interview with Stephanie Cook. Didn't mention the embezzlement. One sharp-eyed commenter in the comment section did. And this was an interview that was 6 months or so after Heidi herself had published the article about the guy from the retailers group that had been released for embezzlement. Now, if some person that works for a comics retailer group seems to me to be less newsworthy than Bill Willingham, a legendary writer in comics, accusing Stephanie Cook of it. So, again, I'm not their editor. I don't decide what gets published and what doesn't at the Beat. And again, it may be coincidental. I've had things pointed out to me where it's like, gosh, I didn't even look at it that way. And maybe that's what this is. But we're just bringing it to light. We're just bringing attention to it.
Well, and one almost has to wonder if depending on how long these people have been in this group, because, membership could be, yesterday or last month or 6 years ago or however long it's been.
Sure.
If Heidi and Stephanie Cook were both in that group prior to the article, prior to the interview, you would think that at some point there would be some kind of a discussion back and forth and say, hey, is there anything to this?
Yeah.
At the very least, to establish, whether it was a thing or not, or to coordinate. Well, we're just not going to talk about it.
Right. Well, here's the thing: the ones that we see the most activity in the group are the same people that say things on social media publicly that you might go, gosh, isn't that something you should have just reached out to Scott Snyder privately about instead of calling him out publicly in front of his thousands and thousands of followers? So these same people in that group, I guess they feel like they have even more privacy there. Of course, that's understandable, but they're the ones that, if they're already talking smack on social media, it's easy to find them talking smack in the private group.
Right.
But Heidi and Stephanie would have probably communicated directly. And here's the thing: I've had a recently crossed paths with Heidi because of the comic book project I'm working on, and the creator was looking for some attention, and Heidi turned him down even though she has done work with him in the past. She turned him down because he was adjacent to Comicsgate. Now she won't say this publicly, but I've got the receipts. I don't know that it's newsworthy or needs to be included in an upcoming Whisper Network. We'll see where it goes. But there is an effort to silence voices and shut down creators for wrongthink and ban books. And I don't like the term on the right side of history, but I'm convinced that the people who want to silence voices and ban books will never be on the right side of history. And I think eventually it will bear that out. And hopefully people like Critical Blast, people like Bounding into Comics, Bleeding Fool, and a lot of these voices that are out there will continue to talk about this and speak up. People on our side of the fence need to speak up more. More of us need to be speaking out. And that doesn't mean attacking people on social media and insulting them, because as soon as you attack or insult, they use that person or you as an example of why it is righteous for them to fight you.
Yeah.
But so you have to sometimes just asking a question, well, how did that work out for you? To absolute hypocrisy or foolishness will sometimes get your point across. I think we just have to be a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser. I think we are smarter and wiser than that group of people, but we have to do that online too. And there's something about Twitter that makes people think they can spit in somebody's face and it's okay. But it's not okay. And it really can be used against you. And people like Mags Visaggio, who I think was a baseball wielding dentist at one point, has seen that some of these angry tweets will come back to haunt you. And so we got to watch what we say and be really smart about it. If you're a believer in God, maybe pray about it before you engage these people. Just try to be wise, try to be smart, try to be calm, but don't be quiet. Don't be afraid to engage. I've lost a handful of friends on Facebook over my outspokenness. And I'm not saying I'm 100% right. I'm frequently wrong, at least 2% of the time, maybe more. But we got to speak up. We got to speak up. And I appreciate what you're doing with your YouTube channel.
Well, I appreciate that.
These things to light.
Well, and a point that I've started to make on the regular is the fact that it's the consumer, and depending on what you're talking about, the voter. It is those people who ultimately have the power and control over all of this, and it's who you vote for the politics side, but also where you put your dollars. What are you going to buy? What are you not going to buy? And the more people that realize that as the consumer, as the person who ultimately decides what you're going to participate in, you have that control. And the people who think they're in charge ultimately are going to come to the realization, either the hard way or not,
Sure.
that they're not really the ones in control. They are the maintainers of that license, that property. They're the custodians of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in charge. It doesn't mean that they're the owners of it. So it's one of those things. And Rezakai makes the point about Gina Carano. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of, because you see it with Tim Pool. They're right on the edge. They've tasted the red pill. They haven't maybe not taken it yet, but it's there. And 2%.
Well, I think they have taken the red pill. I think they've taken the red pill, but they're not. But they are true to their philosophy, right? So you've got classic liberals who will always be classic liberals, but they do not buy into this progressive Marxist ideology, which is a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
There are people in the conservative saviors, the people who are trying to save tradition and save our democracy, our republic rather, that there are people on that side that can go a little too far. And I think that's what's happened in the liberal side of things too. And I don't necessarily think we all need to become moderates. We can still maintain our values, but we can get along. Like what I was saying at the beginning, we can debate without calling each other names or trying to dig up dirt on each other and find out who our employers are and cancel culture is not debate.
Right.
It's not debate. And I saw this mess after the Whisper Network expose dropped Thursday, and suddenly Tess Fowler is out, shouting and shouting like she typically does. And I'm sorry if Tess truly has cancer. I can only presume she does. But to me, just like putting preferred pronouns in your Twitter bio, if you change your profile to say, like, I'm Chris and I'm battling testicular cancer, it seems like I'm looking for public sympathy. And that's just kind of gross. Maybe it's just me. For anybody, it's like saying, hey, I'm broke. Can you please give me some money?
Yeah.
Hey, I need attention. Can you please give me some sympathy? It's just kind of gross. And the fact that so many people coddle that behavior, I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe they just want to look good. Maybe they want to look like, I think the Bible says something about people when they give their tithes. Some people wave it all around before they put it in the basket, and others give it quietly.
Well,
I think
it's
that
like
we need to do.
there's a parable between the Pharisee and the normal citizen. The Pharisee sitting there going, I'm look at how great I am, and I'm so grateful because of how great I am, and makes this public spectacle of his prayer, where the other one is just sitting there going, very quietly and keeping to himself.
Right.
And you're right. There are a lot of people that make a show of it and figure out that clout must count for something, and at some
Victim
point,
status.
yeah, it's going to come
Virtue
around
signaling.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's swinging. I think it's slowly going that way, and I'm sure Trump supporters hope it goes that way come November. It just being somebody, just an observer, I don't see how in the world anybody thinks that a bumbling old man like Joe Biden has got the energy or the support to defeat an incumbent president. I don't know.
And it's really, my theory is really it's not even about Biden. Biden's a Trojan horse for whoever is going in on the vice president ticket.
He's a puppet. He's definitely a puppet.
All right. Well, Chris
so
Braley,
stay tuned. Stay tuned for the next one. It's Brawley, by the way.
Brawley.
It's fine. Everybody gets it wrong. They've gotten it wrong since first grade, and I just answered to it. But
I apologize for being racist enough to get that wrong, Chris.
You ist.
Yes,
you ist.
It's very. So when is the next? When does part 3 drop? Do we have?
It's cooking. I don't have a date. No, I don't have a date. Soon. So it's being assembled. These are so dense. There's so much to them, and I'm really beholden to Penny to put them together. This came. This was a source that came to us several weeks ago, and she reached out to a couple of other sites. We were all kind of copied on it, and when I reached out to some of the other people, they were like, "Yeah, we got that too, but we weren't sure what to do with it." And so we just picked up the ball and ran with it. And so I go back and forth every other day with our source, Penny, and it's cooking, but it's not going to be done. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks. So just stay tuned, and it'll drop, and look for the hashtag Whisper Network, and
well, I can express my appreciation and admiration for the work that you guys are doing. At the same time, say that I am completely jealous of your sources, and but yeah, we will definitely keep an eye on that. Chris Brawley from bleedingfool.com. Thank you very much for being here today and joining us. And I know we went long. Those of you in the chat, thanks very much for being here as well. A couple of little real quick pieces of housekeeping. We do have these stickers. If you want one, you can send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Sci-Fi for Me, 1503 Main Street, number 305, Grandview, Missouri 64030. Those of you who are listening as to this show as a podcast, we do air this show live on our YouTube channel from noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern over on our YouTube channel Monday through Thursday. We do invite you to join us there. And we do ask if you want to subscribe, you are more than welcome to do so. Make sure you have your notifications on and turn to all. Sci-Fi Snob, you're still waiting for your sticker. I have not emailed that to you yet, but we do want to send you one. So send us an email and let us know your address. We'll get that to you. Live from the bunker at sci-fi4me.com for feedback and comments. And we will be back tomorrow. Rick Stacy will join us here in the bunker, and we will talk to him about comics and poetry and all sorts of things. So, Chris, thanks very much for joining us here today, sir. Good luck with everything over there. You guys are doing some yeoman's work. The website, bleedingfool.com, where can they find you on social media?
At Bleeding Fool on the Twitters, and we're on Facebook too at Bleeding Fool, and of course the website, as you said. That's good enough, I guess. They can find me on Twitter too at Chris Brawley.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, folks. That's going to do it for us. We will be back tomorrow.
Thanks for watching Sci-Fi for Me TV. Copyright 2020 by Flaming Dog Media, LLC. All rights reserved. No portion of this program may be retransmitted without the express written consent of Flaming Dog Media. Delivering the multiverse since 2009. This is Sci-Fi for Me TV.